So next up is Dana DiTomaso. Dana is a partner at Kickpoint, where she applies marketing into strategies to grow clients' businesses, in particular to ensure that digital and traditional play well together. With her deep experience in digital, Dana can separate real solutions from wastes of time and budget. In her spare time, Dana is the president of the Advertising Club of Edmonton, serves on the board of Rapid Fire Theatre, co-leads Ladies Learning Code Edmonton, and is the weekly technology columnist on CBC Edmonton AM. She also enjoys drinking beer and yelling at the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and of course, who wouldn't enjoy that?
All right, so I have been working in the digital marketing space for 13 years. I have seen a lot of crazy things change. I built my first website in 1997, and since then I have really been, enjoying this whole internet thing. So certainly when we're talking about the magazine industry, there has been a lot of disruption, maybe not as bad as newspapers, but certainly the internet has changed a lot of what you do. And so playing well with the internet and the magazines that get it right are the ones that are going to be successful going into the future. So I hope that what I talk about today will help all of you be more successful with your own ventures. So first off, we're going to start with how to think like a marketer. And I have 3 top tips when I'm talking to people about what is marketing and how do you need to think like this. So the first off is be strategic. A lot of people get tied up in this, one cool trick to increase conversion rate, or, if you add images to your Twitter post, you'll end up with more retweets. But the thing is that this isn't necessarily going to drive long-term success. You can get really caught up in little tricky things that may have a short-term boost, but they're not necessarily meeting your goals. And so building a strategy as a foundational document will help you decide if that top trick is something that you want to pursue or not. The second thing is bringing insights. And I'm breaking down each of these later on, but definitely when you're thinking about insights, you want to think about the fact that your job is not to bring data, your job is to bring insights. And this is something that we talk a lot about internally at Kickpoint, is that our job is not the data, our job is to tell our clients what to do based on the data. And so that should be the job that you take back as well. Getting the data is the easy part, deciding what to do with it is the hard part that requires a human brain. And execute. There's a lot of great digital marketing plans that sit in a drawer completely unused. It's really depressing when we deliver a website audit, for example, for a client, and then they never do anything with it, and then they're like, our search engine traffic hasn't increased. Well, yeah, you didn't do what we told you to do. So just actually executing on stuff can make a big difference. And there seems to be this sort of fear that, if I do this, then terrible things like locusts and frogs and whatnot will happen. But it's okay to try stuff. And one of the things about the internet is that it is very unforgiving when you tweet something dumb, but it is very forgiving if you do a test and it doesn't work out. So execute more and be less cautious in terms of trying new things. So let's dive a little bit more deeply into each of these. So strategy. We consider a digital strategy is made up of 6 major components. We have goals, brand voice, organic strategy, which is the non-paid search engine stuff, content strategy, which is writing, which you guys are not going to have a problem with. Unlike every other client that I work with who is not an actual publisher, all of them have to pretend to be publishers, and getting content out of them is incredibly hard. You don't have that problem. You have a multitude of content. Your problem will be what to do with it. Social strategy, which is what to share on social, when, with who, and your paid strategy, which is when should we pay to engage these audiences. So now I'm going to break down each of these a little bit more. So for goals, we have to ask ourselves, what's the point, right? Why are we here? What is the whole reason why we are pursuing digital at all? Is it to increase engagement? And what does that engagement look like? Is it to increase subscriptions? And if that's the case, what are our goals for subscriptions? Not things like more, but 10% more, or to reduce people canceling their subscriptions. What's our goal with that? How will we know when we get there? A lot of goals that we see from clients are things that are no way achievable, like brand yourself as the, for one of our clients, brand yourselves as the heart of the community. Well, how do you know when you get there, right? Like that sounds really nice on paper, and I bet your board is super happy with it, but there's no way that that is an achievable, measurable goal, right? Going back to the idea of SMART goals and saying increase subscriptions, well, great, give me a number, and then we can make that into a goal. But if we say something like increase subscriptions or make people feel better about our magazine, well, what does that mean in terms of feelings? So try to shy away from the feelings goals, or if that is a goal that you've been given, try to turn it into something where you can actually measure it and say, I will know that I have achieved this goal when this happens. And then what can we invest into that success? So that could be people, time, resources, money. What can you do with what you've been given? And are those goals realistic based on that? And then what will we need to track? This is the important part of the goal setting, because if you know, for example, that increased subscriptions is one of the goals that you have, then you know the different things that you need to do on the subscription, online subscription side, or perhaps if people call in, or God forbid, fax. So what do we need to track at our end to make sure that we know we're successful? And how do I need to talk to our web developer? Do I need to do some stuff at my end to make sure that this tracking is happening? So that you're going into the strategy already knowing the data that you need to get out of it would make it a lot easier to pull that data at the end of the day. The next thing is brand voice. Now, again, you are in a bit of a unique situation in comparison to most of our clients who, when we say brand voice, they don't really know what we're talking about. You probably have a style guide for your magazine. You probably already have, we say this, we don't say this, and it's, when we talk to clients about brand voice, it could be something as simple as, would our account say awesome when we're happy about something? Yes or no, right? And then it goes into deeper things like, how do we engage angry customers, for example? Whereas with your brand voice, part of what you need to work on is absolutely what words do you use and not use, but then how will people feel when they engage with you? Should it feel like the feeling that they get when they are reading the magazine, whether it's on like actual paper or on the iPad or whatever it might be, right? And each of you probably has a sense of the kinds of feelings you want your issues to evoke. So the question is, how do we carry that through with the rest of our digital strategy? And this is particularly important when we're considering social media. Like if you have a very serious business-minded magazine and your Twitter account is using like emojis and lolling all day, that's a big brand disconnect. That's an obvious one. But certainly you don't want to fall into the trap of being this like generic friendly person that doesn't actually reflect your brand. And a lot of brands default towards that super peppy, thanks so much, ! person on Twitter in particular. But really you want to have a brand that reflects who you are as a company. And so that's important to establish that brand voice. And yeah, try to match that up with how your magazine is. Your magazine, again, you have this foundational document you can rely on when you're building that brand voice, which is great. Yeah.
So do you think it's worthwhile to actually, have a team meeting where you actually have the whole team together and spend 3 hours just sort of, an hour even, just sort of saying, this is our brand voice, this is our brand tone, these are some of the words that we use?
Yep. Yeah, so the question was, should we have a team meeting where we go through and say, this is our brand voice, this is our brand tone, these are the words that we use? And absolutely, and we do that with our clients now. And even when we're setting the brand voice, we actually start by asking everybody individually, not in a big group, because you always know there's that like one loud person who ends up dominating the conversation. So you want to ask people individually. And we do a card sorting exercise. Well, we'll write 20 to 40 attributes on individual cards, and it could be things like pragmatic, avoid friendly, because everybody wants to be friendly, right? Pragmatic, honest, engaged, right? And then you get people to sort through these cards and pick 5 that they feel the brand is, and then 5 they feel the brand is not. And then it's usually more easier to start with what the brand is not than what the brand is. People are better at telling, we are not like this. So sometimes too they'll say, well, I think we're like this right now, but we want to be this other thing. And that's fine too. It gives you kind of a path on where to go forward. But once you've compiled all those results, the brand voice document should be a living thing, not a PDF on a server. Like we actually try to encourage clients to set it up on their intranet if they have one, or make it a web page that's public on their website. Some of our clients are into that idea. Others are more closed, which is fine. That's part of their brand, and want to keep that internally. But sharing that throughout the entire organization, because brand, and this is a whole other presentation, but brand really extends beyond the written word or the video. It should be how people feel when they come to one of your events. It should be the way in which your phone is answered when somebody calls your office. It should be reflected in your hold music. There's in the graphics and the way that is, right? And so you can look at something like the cover of the magazine and say, this is on brand or this is not on brand, but how do you extend that feeling, that perception across those multiple mediums? And so that's where the brand voice document can be a really foundational piece to help you guide that process. And it also gives you a really nice leg to stand on when somebody does something that's really like weird and out of brand. You can say that isn't in keeping with our brand, which I write semi-regularly in emails.
Do you have these cards available anywhere online? Like that's a fun.
Yeah, so we don't actually do those. Although I keep getting requests, we should probably just make a set of brand voice cards. Thanks for the idea. But but what we do now is we take prompts for writers. So I have the link in another presentation that I did strictly about brand. And what we did there is I took a list of like when you're thinking about writing a character in a novel, and these are the different attributes that characters can have that you can use to describe them. We picked 40 of those that we felt were closest to each one of our clients' brands, and then when we do the workshop, we come with those cards. And one of the things that's really tricky for us as an outside agency is not to imprint our own brand on the client's brand. You know, there's some clients who want to work with us because our values are very closely aligned to each other, but there's other clients where, you know, like working with the Chamber of Commerce in Edmonton, for example, very different brand voice from our organization. One of our important points there was to make sure that our brand voice didn't influence theirs. And so keeping that, you know, sort of try not to push the process or be like, are you sure you don't want this card? This one's really nice, right? Don't do that. So, but yes, we should probably have cards. If you can remind me of that brilliant idea at the end, I'll write it down. I'll talk to our art director. I'm sure we can do something. And you had a question as well? So the question was about having social media police to make sure that stuff is vetted before it goes out. Normally we recommend one person is the social media commandant, and they have to approve everything before it happens. But sometimes they're on vacation or sick. So the important thing is to make sure that everybody, again, has that foundational document to rely on in case a crisis happens to arise when you are on a flight to Puerto Rico or something like that, right? Like that's always when things break, Christmas Day. Yeah, that's when there's always problems. So absolutely having that, and then establishing those workflows and having some sort of crisis management chart, as well as a reporting flow chart, so people know, hey, someone's mad on the internet, what do we do? And then going through that process and understanding how that works. With many of our clients, and I talk about this in the tools section at the end, we use a tool called Buffer to schedule social media posts in advance. And Buffer has a nice approval function where you can establish some people as basic users, so they can write stuff all day, but then somebody has to approve it before it's actually added to the queue. And one of the great ways to get everybody in the office using the brand voice is to make them write tweets, and then it's less work for you to do too. All right, so organic strategy. So what kinds of searches should be returning your website in the search results? What crazy things are people Googling that would come up with something on your website that's relevant? And is the best page coming up for that search or just the home page? So this is what we see fairly regularly when we look at sites that aren't well optimized for the search engines, is that 80% of the people who come to your website via search engine start on the home page, and 20% start on other pages. That should be flipped around. 20% of the people coming from the search engine should be starting on the home page, 80% should be starting on other pages. You want to provide the most relevant page for that search. You don't want to make them do more work to dig around. And the other thing too to consider from a usability perspective is most of the time we don't want people to end up on the home page. We want them to end up somewhere else. So if that's the case, and this is something that you need to work with leadership to get them out of this mindset, people spend way too much time obsessing about the home page and making sure that it's perfect and that it's got all the different things that we want them to go on. But really, if we're doing our job as digital marketers, most people will not start on the homepage. Most people may not ever visit your homepage. Most people may not ever visit your website on a desktop, right? They may only visit on a mobile device. There could be people who only ever engage with your brand using mobile, especially if they're being driven there from social media. So taking these factors into consideration means that also part of our job as digital marketers is to make sure we're using websites on mobile devices. So, if half of your visits come from mobile devices, half the time when you're checking out your website should also be on a mobile device. And if that is irritating you, then obviously think of your users. If this is driving you crazy, just imagine how people who aren't familiar with the website must be feeling right now. Does it load slowly? Are there annoying pop-ups? And I spend A lot of time I send screenshots to brands if I'm on their mobile site and they've got like one of those subscribe now pop-ups, except it totally obscures the article, and the X to close it is just like off to the side, and I can't actually close it on mobile. And it's like, you guys have no idea, you've never tried this on mobile. And so letting them know, I do a lot of like letting them know that that's bad. But that's part of it too, is we work on desktop computers. So of course we think about the desktop experience more than the mobile experience, whereas our users may be thinking more about the mobile experience. So that's an important consideration as well. And are you converting organic traffic for whatever your conversion goal may be? Again, maybe it's subscriptions, maybe it's comments, maybe it's people doing social shares, but is that actually happening as a result of organic traffic? So are they drive-bys, or are they actually getting engaged? And you can assume a lot of the time that organic traffic are people who may never have heard of you before. Maybe they're Googling something really specific, and one of your articles happened to come up in the search results, they've never heard of you before. So how do you turn that person from a casual drive-by into an engaged user? And I don't necessarily think that pop-ups are the answer. Sometimes they are, but again, they have to be optimized for mobile. Your content strategy. So, beyond the massive amount of content your magazine produces, and maybe that's behind a paywall, and if it is, then how do you take that into consideration with the organic strategy? There's certainly things that you can do with Google News and whatnot to ensure that Google News gets the full version of the article, but then users don't get it unless they log in and give you some money. Do people here use Google News syndication for their pieces? Okay, so I would recommend looking into Google News syndication. There's a couple of very specific requirements. One is you have to be newsworthy. All of you are, I'm sure. The second part of it is that the URL has to be a little bit funny. So this is more of a technical problem. So the URL for most websites is yourmagazine.com/article name, right? If it's a Google News approved article, it has to be yourmagazine.com/article name -unique ID. And so if you use WordPress, for example, there's a plugin that will help you with that, but the problem is that then you need to redirect all the old pages to the new pages to make sure that you don't lose any search engine juice, and Google thinks that all these articles suddenly disappeared and then new ones reappeared. So I can talk to people outside of, it's a long process, and I can talk to you outside of this if that's something that you want to pursue. But Google News help is quite helpful, actually. And the process is pretty simple to go through, but what that means is that if people are Googling things like, when will oil go above $50 a barrel, that your articles about that have a potential of coming up in Google News results, and that can potentially drive you a ton of traffic outside of your local market that you're already servicing.
Do they pay for content?
No. But you can, the way that it works is that you can do an entire article with Google News and then require a paywall yourself. So there's a slightly different syndication piece that you provide to Google News so that they get all the keywords in the article. But then if you say, like, this is your 5.3 this month, now you have to pay, then you can still implement that kind of tracking on that.
Can you track your page views through the Google News?
The way in which you track your page views is by Google Analytics. So you would just see that it's coming from Google News.
Oh, so the article resides on your...
The article resides in your website. Google News is just presenting just news about that topic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And it's an enormously popular feature of Google is using Google News. Okay. So part of content strategy, so beside the magazine pieces, the bread and butter of what you do, what other pieces are required on the website? What pieces are missing right now? Again, if you think about the website, like I just visited an article on your website and I have no idea who you are, what are those surrounding pieces that I need to explain who it is that we are? What action do I want people to take? Thinking about things like subscription pages or about, or the masthead, or those kinds of pieces, like what needs to happen there. And who is engaging with your content? What is your audience for this content? And are they looking at the right kind of pieces on the website? Social strategy, so what networks are you on? Don't bite off more than you can chew. I know that the temptation is there to say, yeah, we're going to be on Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and Instagram and YouTube and Periscope, but and something on Reddit. But the difficulty is that you need to make sure that you're engaging well with channels. So I encourage people to just start with a couple and then love them to death and then move on to the next ones before you do everything all the time badly. So that's a real temptation, is to, you feel this pressure to be on all the networks. Don't until you can do them all well. And how often do you post and engage? How often is your social media audience online what is the best time for you to be posting stuff? We see a lot of the time, for example, that people, they get into the office at like 8, and then they do a whole bunch of tweets and they go about their day. But their audience is only paying attention to Twitter between 10 and 11 because that's when they happen to be on a break, right? Or over lunchtime. So I got a look at the Edmonton Journal's web statistics, for example, and the spike at lunchtime was ridiculous. And so they schedule a lot of their social media posts at lunchtime to drive people to those specific articles. So whatever it is that they feel is the most interesting of that day or the most shareable, they make sure to share during lunch hour. So during lunch, when you open up Facebook, there's the Edmonton Journal, and there you go to the piece that they want you to look at. We have another client who has a lot of very late night visitors to their website. And so they post on social media, they schedule them in advance, and they go between midnight and 1 in the morning. And since they've started doing this, their organic reach on Facebook has increased significantly. They don't have to pay for their audience to see their stories on Facebook because people are just seeing them naturally because none of their competitors are posting during that time, right? And also think about too, when you're posting these social channels, especially Facebook, your competition is not a competing magazine. Your competition is somebody's engagement photos or somebody's new baby or that cute puppy video, right? So how can you make your posts interesting so that you can compete with, puppies on a train or something like that, so that people actually want to engage with you? I mean, BuzzFeed, for example, has done an excellent job of moving from the GIF post into some really great in-depth reporting. And so they have the BuzzFeed politics section, which if you haven't checked it out is excellent. I recommend reading it. They have done a really good job of adding on these additional pieces, but they still have these really strong, I wouldn't say clickbaity, but they drive clicks. They're not clickbaity in the sense of like, this one weird trick will change your life forever, like Upworthy type posts. But they do a good job of writing a headline that they know is going to drive engagement. So I would recommend looking at them as a model. And how are you building that community? And it's those first 500 really engaged users is the foundation of your community. So how are you building that community? How are you rewarding the vocal members of your community? If there's somebody who retweets your posts all the time, give them a free subscription, right? There's things that you can do to reward the community to say that you are noticing and you're appreciating what it is that they're doing for you. And a lot of that kind of ongoing social media engagement is really taken for granted or ignored. So it's important to reward those really engaged people. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to embellish that point that even just a simple act of liking people's comments or favoriting their comments on various social channels,
Yeah.
you'd be amazed at the positive feedback you get when as a big brand or as a local brand, you're actually liking somebody's comments and you'll actually get people saying, wow, I'm so impressed that you're actually answering some of our comments. Like
Yeah.
normally brand pages never respond.
Yeah.
And so that simple act of liking their comments, the ones that are not terribly negative and awful, can really drive engagement. Plus, it tells the Facebook algorithm that you are engaging, and then Facebook rewards you by more engagement.
Well, and the other thing, so talking about the comment was about you should really like and favorite nice things people say about you because it makes them feel great about you, that positive reinforcement loop. But the other thing Facebook is doing now is they're actually showing a badge on your Facebook page on how fast you reply to messages. So that's new, and they just did that, I think 2 weeks ago is when they started doing that, so get on that. And if that means that you have to set it up so it sends you a text message when you get a new message on Facebook, fine. Or there's a backup, or make sure that the intern is paying attention to that and then lets you know that there's a message to reply to. Like whatever is going to work, make that happen. And so part of it is we fall into this trap of just scheduling these brand messages all the time, and we never actually engage with anyone. Build a list of who you have your subscribers' information. Build a list of them on Twitter, for example, and say, here's my list of subscribers. Pay attention to what they're saying. If it's within your social strategy, retweet them once in a while or comment to them. They will be beyond thrilled that you are actually paying attention to what they have to say and not just paying attention to what you have to say. And that's really where that strong community comes from. And crisis management, I recommend building a crisis management flowchart of, think of the worst things that could possibly happen. For example, let's say a writer at the magazine tweets something kind of racist, and then they get on a flight, and then their flight isn't going to land for like 10 hours. No, this actually happened to somebody. So what do you do as a brand, right? So for example, the Edmonton Fringe Festival, I don't know if you guys know what happened with them. Okay, so they rely heavily on volunteers. My wife was on the board, so I know a little bit of the background of this. So they rely very heavily on volunteers, and their volunteer coordinator sent out letters to 5 volunteers who had developmental disabilities, I guess is the best way to put it, and said, no, sorry, you can't volunteer this year. And Fringe has always been a really welcoming, we'll take everybody kind of volunteer. And then one guy went public on Facebook on a Saturday. Of course, no one was paying attention on a Saturday. And so it took about 6 hours for Fringe to say anything about it. In those 6 hours, people got pretty mad, but they're like, you know what, Fringe has a lot of goodwill, we're willing to wait. And then the response from Fringe was, there's 2 sides to every story. Not the best response. And then the ED posted again and said, I'm on vacation, I'm not saying anything else about this until I'm gone, or until I'm back. And then the internet just like, right? Pitchforks, torches, it was pretty bad. And we were actually coming back from a camping trip and we got a text message like, you guys should really go on Facebook. Something horrible has happened. And they didn't have a crisis management plan. And their communications person was not, you know, super into social media. They mostly did PR and press releases and that kind of thing. So they literally had no idea what to do. So have a mock crisis at your organization. Pretend that something like this, or something that you could actually see happening, is happened. What do you do? Who's involved? Pretend it happened on a Sunday of a long weekend, right? How are you going to find out about it? And how are you going to deal with it? And make sure, too, that leadership is engaged and has empowered you to respond if you can't get in touch with them. You know, you don't want the people handling social media to be afraid that they're going to get fired by tweeting something like, hey, thanks for letting us know, we're going to get back to you as soon as possible, right? Like, that seems fairly innocuous, but I know people who have been afraid that they are going to get fired for saying anything at all, and they want to hear from the CEO before that's tweeted. You cannot depend on that. It has to be, you have to engage very quickly. Even just saying a, hey, thanks for listening is enough to maybe, you know, get the fires a little bit less ragey until you can actually come up with a response. So develop that kind of crisis communications. Paid strategy. So sometimes on the internet, you do have to pay for traffic. What paid networks are you on right now? Are you doing Google? Is it Google remarketing? Are you on Facebook? Are you paying for tweets? What content will you be using for what part of that paid funnel, and what is the goal of paid? So, for example, that boost button on Facebook is a terrible thing, and you should never use it. The boost button basically says, give money to Facebook. You know, please help us increase our stock price. So educating yourself on how to build better paid campaigns, especially on Facebook, is definitely a worthy investment. Actually teaching you how to set that up is outside of the scope of the time that I have here today, but trust me, go into the ad manager, play around with it, never click that boost button again. Do simple stuff like take your mailing list that you have, I'm sure all of you have a mailing list, upload it to Facebook as an audience, and then you can market to just those people. One of the cool things about Facebook too is that if I have a mailing list and I upload it to Facebook, then I can create what's called a lookalike audience. And I can say, get me people who are like these people that I already told you about. And it's a very similar audience, and we find that they have extremely strong conversion rates because there's a certain set of characteristics that makes them want to be interested in you. They're already quite similar to the people that you've put in there. So like, there's lots of stuff that can be done with Facebook audiences. And also look at things like remarketing. If somebody has hit your subscription page, for example, but didn't actually complete a subscription, let's start showing them ads, right? And I'm sure all of us have been on websites where we looked at something, maybe we put it in our cart, we didn't buy it, and then it chased us around the internet for a while. That is extremely simple to set up and kind of creepy. Try not to be too creepy, but people are used to remarketing. As much as people tell me all the time that they hate it, remarketing works. People buy based on remarketing, and it is one of the cheapest forms of advertising that you can do. If the only advertising you can afford is a very small budget, look at remarketing as the first thing that you spend your money on. The click-through rates are much cheaper, especially on Facebook, for example, and you can end up with massive returns on that. And really, even just like the first thing that you do, if you have a subscription page, if somebody goes to the subscription page and doesn't finish it, and there's lots of how-to docs on Google and on Facebook on how to set up those conversion tracking codes so that you're tracking the people who did not convert, and set up a campaign for that, and toss a little bit of money at it and then start testing that. Anything else, and say like, what kind of copy drives more people to click? What kind of images drive more people to click? Is there a place on the form where people are dropping off all the time? You know, are we asking for too much information? Let's remove this field and see what happens. So there's lots of different conversion testing that you can do, and especially once you start paying for it. I don't know why people think that, you know, when you pay for advertising, it's somehow more valuable in terms of your time. Because, for example, you know, you have to get approval to spend $500, but you can call 10 people in for a meeting for an hour, right? Nobody asks for approval for that, even though it technically costs more, right? So certainly think about the different ways in which you want to justify this advertising spend. And by starting a small remarketing campaign and getting familiar with the ad networks, it's a relatively low-cost way to get your feet wet and start to justify those larger budgets for things like ad spends. So, all right. So strategy really tells you where it is that you're going, and it also helps you figure out what kind of resources you're going to need. So once you've written out the strategy and say, here's what we want to do in the next 12 months, and here's all the points that I've covered, now you know, okay, so I need myself and X number of dollars, or we're going to need to hire some part-time help, or we're going to have to hire, you know, an outside person to handle our Twitter for us, or whatever it might be. You know, you'll have a much better sense of the kind of resources that you need in order to meet those goals. And what kind of budget? You know, if you're going to be spending money on Facebook, it can't just be like $5 here, $5 there. You have to think about over the course of a month, you know, we're going to spend $500 a month on this specific network and $1,000 a month on this other network. And then you can figure out how it will be partitioned over the course of the month instead of just accidentally blowing it all in the first week. And what are realistic outcomes? So part of our job as digital marketers is people expect, you know, 2,000% rate of return on what we do. And they would never expect that of a billboard, right? Like that's not something, but somehow we've done this to ourselves as digital marketers that people expect these ridiculous rates of return that just aren't going to happen. Sometimes you get lucky, that rarely happens. So it's important to set these expectations and to say, like, I know that you think you're gonna get 1,000 new leads, but based on the spend, you know, let's break it down. If you have $3 a click and only 10% of the people sign up, that this is what you're looking for, right? And so start to do that math to explain to people what they can realistically expect as a result of this. And what are you going to need to track in order to know whether or not you're reaching these goals? So knowing ahead of time, this is where we're going to go, and this is how it's going to look, and I need our web person to set up these things for me and install these pieces of code so that I'm tracking ahead of time on how it's going to work. And remember, your job is to bring insights, not data. So this brings us to the next point, which is talking about good reporting practices for digital marketing. Your different data sources have to talk to each other, and they don't really right now, right? Like to pull a report, you probably go into like Google Analytics, and then maybe you go into Twitter, and then maybe you go into Facebook, and then you make like a big Excel spreadsheet, and it looks kind of crappy, and then you mail it around and say like, here's some data, guys, but it took you 6 hours just to get that data. So there are lots of different places that you can use to pull data together in a less sucky fashion, so we say. So there's Kissmetrics. Kissmetrics is about $500 a month to start. It is a little bit spendy, I know, right? I do recommend free things, but it does help you bring together different data sources. If you have an app and you would like to track things in the app, Mixpanel is an excellent analytics tool for app tracking. And if you have an app as well, I would recommend that you make sure that it is included in the Google Now, what's it called, app integrations? Because I don't know, how many people here have Android devices? Oh, like 3 of us. Okay, well, you can get Google Now on non-Android devices. And in Canada, Android has 53% of the market, just not when it comes to magazine people, apparently. So part of what happens on Android is there's a product called Google Now, which is the creepiest and most awesome thing you'll ever have. It does things like it lets me know what the latest TieCat game is going to be and what the score was and if there's any new TieCat news. And it knows that I like the Blue Jays, so it's always giving me information about that. Or I Googled How to Get Away with Murder because of that, because she won Emmy. And so it started feeding me articles about that show. And like literally I Googled that on my desktop and now I have these articles on my phone. Or it knows, you know, here's your flight information. By the way, your flight's delayed. Here's the new gate information, and it sends you alerts, or you have to leave for your meeting in 15 minutes. It's going to take you X amount of time to get there. Or there's a whole bunch of traffic on the way home. You should leave now if you want to get there by this time. So it's creepy and awesome, but it also allows you to integrate your app with it. So if you have an app for your magazine, then you can say, okay, so I want people who look up our magazine a lot or have this app on their phone to get our articles delivered in Google Now, and then I want to make sure that when they tap that link in Google Now, it opens up the app. So that's something to take a look at as well. Do you have a question or just, okay. Google Analytics, of course. And in Google Analytics, you can hook in different data sources as well. So don't feel that Google Analytics is like the last thing that you do. I would recommend, Google Analytics has a free course that you can take where it teaches you how to do some of the more advanced Google Analytics stuff. Give yourself a PD day and you're going to do Google Analytics that day. Go through how to do everything, because there's a lot of powerful stuff once you get past the basic reports. Like the custom reporting options in Google Analytics are great, the dashboarding options are great, but a lot of people don't go into that. So teach that. Teach yourself how to do that. And then there's also some dashboarding solutions. So Clipfolio is one of them. They're a pretty cool company. You do have to be a bit of a programmer in order to make anything custom in Clipfolio, though. So if you have a programmer in-house that you can harass or give chocolate to, and then they will do things for you, Clipfolio is good. Or there's Dash This, which we use Dash This. And I think it's $50 a month or something for as many dashboards, but then you can create dashboards for, like, here's the head of, editorial is going to want this kind of dashboard, and then the editor is going to want this other dashboard, and different role, the publisher is going to want this dashboard. So you can create different dashboards for different roles in the organization, and you can pull together data from all kinds of different data sources. So it brings in Google Analytics, brings in Webmaster Tools, it brings in Facebook Insights, it brings in Twitter Analytics, it brings in LinkedIn Analytics. So you can grab all this data and put it in one place. This is what we use with our clients. The dashboards you can do now are a bit elementary, but if you're using nothing now, This is going to look like a miracle in comparison. So I recommend checking it out. And then Rival IQ, I've talked about this actually the last AMPA event I was at. I love Rival IQ, even though it is a bit spendier, and I have prices for everything at the end, because it allows you to do competitive analysis tracking. So you can say, here we are, and here's our competition. In the last AMPA event that I did, actually Venture graciously agreed to be the guinea pig, and so we compared Venture against Canadian Business and a couple of other competitive magazines, and could really pinpoint where Venture could step up their social game to compete with these other products. So they do have a 14-day trial. You can just sign up for it, put you and your competitors in, and run a bunch of reports, and then that would probably help justify the cost right there. So I recommend checking out Rival IQ. I love these guys. And they have Google Analytics integration coming, which is really going to be cool. I'm in the alpha for it, and it looks really awesome so far. So really, data is not the problem, right? There's all these different places that we can get data. The problem is getting it all in the same place. So out of all these tools, pick one. Stop looking for tools once you've picked one, because otherwise you'll spend all day looking for tools. The tool itself is not going to make everything magically better. It's just going to enable you to get it all in one place. And then get everything in one place and start sharing that around. And just accept the parts that you can't track, right? Maybe you can't track phone calls. Maybe you can't track when people actually send in those little mail response cards in a magazine, right? There's stuff that you're not going to be able to track. That's okay. Just have it written down so that there's this understanding that we can't track X, Y, and Z, and here's why. And make your reporting process as painless as possible. Getting the data should not be the longest part of reporting. Getting the data should be the shortest piece that you do, and then you can spend your time coming up with those insights, which is the reason why, as digital marketers, we always say this at the agency. Our job is not to get data, our job is to get insights. And so if something is taking too long to get on a regular basis and we're wasting our time with it, is there an investment that we can make now to make it easier for us in the future? And make sure you're choosing metrics that matter, right? Does bounce rate matter to you? Well, if it's 80%, then yeah, probably. That's a problem. Something is horribly wrong. But bounce rate itself as a metric is really only a symptom. It's not necessarily the disease. So what matters to us metric-wise? Is it time on site? Well, why is it time on site? And what does that mean in terms of our larger goals? Maybe we want to drive more reader engagement. Okay, time on site is a good thing to look at. Number of pages is a good thing to look at. But don't get bogged down by metrics that are meaningless. So for example, new sessions is a metric that people like to report on a lot, like new visitors to the website. And actually, it's a completely meaningless metric, and I wish Google didn't have it in there. Because if I go to your website on my desktop, and then I go to your website on my phone, that's 2 visitors, one of which was new, even though it was still me. Or if I went to your website last month, and then I went to the website this month, 2 visitors, one of which was new because it was more than 30 days. So the new visitors metric is totally useless. Like, just ignore that right now. But because it's in there, people like to report on it all the time, even though it's totally meaningless. And report to your company regularly, even if they don't want to hear it, right? Like, here's the report from marketing. Enjoy it, suckers. Like, make it company-wide. Send out a company-wide email once a month to say, hey, here's the stuff. And this can really help get people engaged with what it is that you're doing, other than saying that you play on Facebook all day. Because that's what I find is that a lot of people say about social media people, right? It's like, oh, you just spend all day on Facebook, what a nice job. It's like, you have no idea what I do. So it's a lot of times too, when we're talking to, we had a fun survey at the office where we said, ask your parents what they think you do at your job, and there were some really funny answers. It's like, yep, nobody knows what we do. But my mom thought I was a secretary at Google for a while. Like, no, that's not what I do. So circulating these reports to the entire organization, like everybody who works there, can really make a difference in terms of people understanding what it is that you do at your job, right? And report on like other things that have affected this. You know, what are the outside factors that you have no control over that are affecting your ability to market? And understand why something worked or didn't work. Be honest about what the issue was. And if you try to test and it didn't work, like tell people why you think it didn't work and what you're going to do next time. It's science, basically. Right, so the third part of this is execution. So I would like everybody to implement 10% more of their ideas. I find that there's definitely, you know, you come up with these cool ideas and you write them down and then you're like, oh, I don't know if it's going to work. Like just 10% of those and just try it, right? Like it's not going to hurt. At the very least, maybe it'll fail. That's okay. At least now you know, nope, that wasn't right. Create a culture of testing at your organization. You know, failing a test is okay, and we really want to make sure that people accept that failure is an okay result. I would rather you tried 100 different things and 10 of them worked than 10 things and only one of them worked, right? Like if that's going to be your failure rate, then try tons of different stuff so that you can get it out there and you know what's working and what isn't. For one of our clients right now, they're a debt management company in the US, and we have a pretty good sense of who their audience is to get new people into their debt management programs. Basically, if you follow 3 Real Housewives shows on Facebook and Candy Crush, you're probably in debt, is what we've gathered. But there's some crazy stuff we found from there. That really escapist, like entertainment, celebrity gossip, and non-strategy based video games that you play on Facebook, like lots of casino games. You know, which you think about it, you're like, yeah, of course, you know, but it was going through this audience and finding that out. So for them, what we're doing is we're going to be running 100 different Facebook audiences and throwing a small amount of money at each of them, and then as soon as some of them are statistically significant in terms of success, then we're going to shut off the rest and just run with those, right? But if we just did like 5 tests, then we might not have known about, you know, audience number 89 that ends up being the rock star for them. So running more tests is definitely the way to go, and being okay with the tests that don't succeed. And what do you take as your pass-fail points? You know, what makes you say, okay, this is definitely a winner and this is definitely not a winner? And write that down in advance. What are you going to be happy with in terms of a success? Be curious. Try all sorts of different stuff. If you see a competitor, for example, or another magazine doing something interesting on their website, you don't want to copy your competition, but you want to try to figure it out. Is this working for them, and is this something we should try for ourselves? We spend a lot of time, you know, digging into what our competitors are doing, and then seeing, is it worth it for us? You know, and don't just blindly follow down that path. Again, test it. And then if it doesn't work, great. You know, it doesn't work, move on. So here is a list of some of the tools that we use and pay for in our organization that I hope will be useful for you, and I've given costs for all of them. So first one, Rival IQ. I love these guys. Seth is one of the co-founders, and he is so helpful anytime you have any questions at all. It's one of the best companies with regards to customer support that I've seen. So this is the one where you track your competition, and their social insights are fantastic. It's one of the best social reporting tools, regardless of the competitive stuff, that we use at our organization. Google Analytics integration is coming, and it's $199 American a month, which is like $4,000 Canadian a month right now. So that's the other thing is whenever we get a US client, we're like, woohoo, now we can pay for Rival IQ. This one is probably one of the more spendy options, but sign up for that 14-day trial, start to run some reports, and show the person who makes the decisions how awesome it is, and I bet you they would approve it. Buffer. Buffer is great for social scheduling. So you create a schedule on when you're going to be sharing in posts, and then you toss them into Buffer, and then Buffer makes sure they go out at the right time. They do have pretty basic reporting, so it tells you how many clicks a link got, which is really useful. And again, it has that really simple editorial workflow that we talked about earlier, where you can give multiple people access to submit things, and then they can, and then you can approve them before they go out. That editorial workflow is not included in the free plan. You do have to be in at least the $10 American a month plan, and they have annual discounts as well. I think you get 2 months free or something if you sign up for an annual plan. Hootsuite is the social media management tool of choice that we recommend. Hootsuite is scheduling, but we don't like it. We think the Buffer does much better scheduling. But if you have Instagram, now you can schedule Instagram posts through Hootsuite, which you can't do with Buffer yet, but you will be able to eventually. So, yeah.
Just curious, how is the scheduling better in Buffer than Hootsuite?
How is the scheduling better in Buffer than Hootsuite was the question. So the Hootsuite UI is just kind of crappy.
Yeah.
And, and they don't, Buffer allows you to set specific times, and then it just automatically sets it as those times. With Hootsuite, you have to put in the time that you're going to be sharing it.
Right.
So with Buffer, you set the schedule once, and then the posts all follow that. With Hootsuite, you have to be putting in the time every single time.
Okay, great.
So yeah, it's
Multiple days,
yeah.
single tweet, for example.
Yeah.
Like your e-newsletter,
Yeah.
tweet, promoting your e-newsletter, you could actually schedule once
Mhm.
a month on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, and it's a better UI in Buffer as well. I find that the Hootsuite UI is just not great. Do you have a question in the back?
Yeah, you said that with Buffer it's really basic reporting.
Yes.
Can you kind of expand on that a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
is there still a place where you can bring different areas together?
No, there's, so the reporting in Buffer. So in Buffer, the reporting is just engagement on those specific posts, like comments, clicks, reshares, likes, and that's about it. So there's a report that you can run when you have the higher up paid options that shows you clicks against time, but you can also export that into a CSV and pull that into another reporting solution as well. And so it's just really basic reporting in Buffer, so don't have a lot, don't expect a lot from that. Yeah?
Does Buffer have an auto scheduler?
Yes. Yeah, so Buffer does have an auto scheduler function. So when you set up the schedule in Buffer, then there's a nice Chrome extension. And when you're on a page that you want to share in Buffer, you click the Chrome extension, you write out the post, you pick what networks it's going to go on, and you say schedule, and then it just tosses it in the next available slot. Or you can say share this next according to our already determined schedule, or you can set a specific time, or you can share it now. So it gives you a lot of different options.
Can you put a photo in that auto scheduler?
Yeah, you can put a photo in the auto scheduler. You can't do GIFs yet, and we tweet them about this once a week, telling them to hurry up already. So, because you can have GIFs on Facebook now. Why can't I really want to do GIFs on through Buffer for Twitter, because GIFs also drive up engagement. I tweeted an amazing GIF today that I'm absolutely going to use on a regular basis. If you check my Twitter feed, it's a busy news day in the US, all kinds of crazy things are happening, and somebody posted this great GIF of what reporters are like, and it's a dog that got a ball and was really happy about it, and then more balls started falling out of the sky, and the dog just lost its mind. So I saved that for something. I don't know what, but you're going to use that. So. Yeah, and Hootsuite is great if your social is handled by multiple people, because you set up a team in Hootsuite, and then you can see Dana replied to this, and Megan replied to this, and Jen replied to that, so you know what was handled by whom, I think. There's probably an editor in here who's going to correct me. But it's Hootsuite, they have a free version, or it's $9 American a month. So again, a very inexpensive option. Moz is an SEO tool, and it really is great for do-it-yourself search engine optimization. You do not need to be a search engine optimization expert. They have tons of articles and videos. They have a huge conference in Seattle every year called MozCon that I've spoken at for the last 3 years. Just tons of learning with Moz. And so they're really trying to empower people to teach themselves how to do SEO. So it tells you, it'll spider your site like a search engine would on a regular basis, and tells you of any technical problems that are coming up. It gives you great keyword ranking data. rankings are kind of a lie because you and I could Google the same thing, and based on our search history, we could get 2 different results in 2 different orders. But for us, we look at ranking data as kind of the canary in the coal mine. If 50 rankings suddenly disappeared, something is horribly wrong, and what are we going to do about that, right? So think of keyword ranking data from that perspective. Moz is great for beginners, and it comes with a tool called Follower Wonk, which gives you really deep Twitter research. So I love using Follower Wonk. For example, if we're pitching a company to work with us, and think of it in terms of getting interview subjects as well, or people who you really want to become influencers and talk about your magazine. So you can say, okay, so these 3 people work at the company that I want to become best friends with, take all their money. So put them in Follower Wonk and say, who do these 3 people all follow in common? What media outlets are these people already paying attention to? And then you say, okay, so now I know that I need to get an article about us in this publication, right? Or I need to get this influencer talking about us. And it can help you really settle down who the targets might be. Or looking for people to follow, or interesting sources for your reporters. Follower Wonk is really powerful for that kind of Twitter research. So I recommend checking Moz out. And they have, I think, a 30-day free trial, and it's $99 American a month for the smallest plan. You probably will not need anything above the smallest plan, unless you're managing more than 3 websites. And then the Google Keyword Tool. This is good for people to what kind of crazy stuff do people search for when they look for what it is that you write about, right? Or your magazine, or your competition. So the things that you think people search for and the things that people actually search for are 2 different things, I guarantee it. People search for the craziest stuff online, and something like 15% of the queries every day on Google are totally new and things Google hasn't seen before. So this is good for kind of those 2 to 3 word length keyword phrases, right? So people searching for stuff like price of oil, not when will the price of oil go above $50. That's not going to come up in Google Keyword Tool. It's too long, too specific. But it is good for those bigger phrases that you might want to consider. And so when you're thinking about, okay, so we've written an article about urban planning in Calgary, I'm going to go on the keyword tool and figure out what I should name this article for SEO purposes. That's where the keyword tool comes in handy. Totally free. Keywordio is also a free tool that provides you with those question searches. So those much longer search phrases that come up and auto-suggest. So when you start typing in Google and it comes up with those suggestions, Keywordio has scraped all that and provides that in their service. So what I like doing is I'll type in something like urban planning Calgary into Keywordio, and then I'll see what kinds of crazy question searches come up. And we do this a lot for hotels, for example. So one of our clients is the Westin Calgary, and so for them we'll type in things like Calgary hotels and see what kind of questions people are asking about Calgary hotels. And from an editorial perspective as well, it might be interesting to give to your writers just so they can come up with ideas. If they're like, I have no idea what to write about, which happens, everybody has writer's block, certainly using Keywordio can give you those types of question searches that people have actually asked on Google, and free. Facebook Insights, so I talked about this earlier, upload your mailing list and it'll give you demographic data. Unfortunately, you only get better demographic data in the US, of course, all good things are American when it comes to the internet stuff. But you can also install some JavaScript on your website. It is super easy, anybody can do it, I promise, you don't have to be a technical wizard. And you can get audience demographics of the kind of people who visit your website, which you can also use to remarket to them. And this is where the remarketing comes in. Lots and lots of great ideas with Facebook remarketing. Again, the simplest one, if they've been to your website and they have not logged in, for example, if you have a subscriber center, if they've been to your website, went to the subscriber page and did not complete it, let's start remarketing to them. Lots of cool stuff that you can do there. And Facebook Insights is totally free unless you decide to run an ad. Please don't click the boost button, it's terrible. And then Canva. So maybe your art director's busy and they can't be bothered with giving you lots of little graphics for Twitter to make your tweets look good. Canva is a really nice do-it-yourself solution. You do not need to be a graphic designer to use Canva, and the stuff that it outputs looks really great. So I recommend that, and then your art director, you will stop harassing them all day. Our art director, we drive her crazy on a regular basis, asking for stuff. It's like illustrations, or we need a Twitter post for this, or we need a Facebook post for this. In Canva, you can also say, I'm going to post this on Twitter, and it makes the image the right size, so that you don't need to worry about looking up the ad standards for different things. It just does it for you. So Canva's great, and also totally free. So to sum up, be able to justify your decisions that you're making in your strategies. A lot of that is that foundation of data is going to help you justify it. Don't get distracted by irrelevant metrics. You know, things like bounce rate or time on site or new visitors, which is a terrible metric anyway. Make sure you're paying attention to the metrics that matter, and don't let other people try to toss you in a way that you know is not a metric that matters. Like things like increasing Facebook likes. That's really not a metric you want to optimize for, because what does it mean at the end of the day, right? Likes don't pay the bills. But likes can be a symptom of a greater thing, and that's what you want to focus on instead. And then understand how all those different pieces come together. By building those reporting dashboards, you can start to see how organic traffic affects social or vice versa, how many people come to your website by clicking your link on your Facebook page. Like, there's lots of different things that you can take a look at and start to get a better sense of how your digital ecosystem works. Iterate quickly, lots of different changes. Change stuff right all the time. You know, and respect the time of the network too. Like on Facebook, things last a day. On Twitter, things last 15 minutes. So just move really quickly through the different stuff that you're going to be looking at. And make sure to tell everybody what you're doing. Be as loud as possible to show people so that they get excited and engaged and are maybe willing to help to make your marketing better. You have to be really cautious about using sites like Taboola and Outbrain though. And you're competing against people who have, like, you know, coconut oil will change your life ads, right? I'm waiting for the coconut oil backlash, which is inevitable. So you have to be really cautious about where you're retargeting. And so this is actually where the Google Keyword Tool and the Facebook Insights can really come in handy, because then you can see the kinds of things that your audience is already interested in. So let's say, for example, you know that your audience spends a ton of time on, trying to think of like a random, like BuzzFeed, for example, right? Which has this part of the, I think they use Outbrain for their content at the end of articles. So you know that your audience spends a ton of time on BuzzFeed. When you're in those networks, you can say, only show my ads on these specific websites, because if you say, just show it out there to the internet, you're going to end up being a result of a lot of click fraud. And Outbrain and Taboola are not interested in refunding any click fraud fees. They just want your money. It's a very new industry, and it's like how Google AdWords was at the very beginning, when there was tons of click fraud and nobody was doing anything about it. They're not very evolved yet. So definitely take that into consideration. Figure out where people are spending their time and market to those sites. This is where reader surveys can come in handy too. Like, tell us the kinds of sites you spend most of your time on. Great, we're going to market to those websites.
And Pinterest and Twitter, Pinterest at least shows you what other brands they're following.
Yes.
So you can see in
Yep.
Pinterest, for example.
Yep, and you can do that on Facebook if they've got their page open. Maybe they don't, but I don't know. I find a lot of people have their Facebook just free and open for anyone to take a look at. So, yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Great, well, thank you. Oh, sorry, Jess. Yeah.
I was just going to ask what news sources you look at to get ideas for new things to try.
Yeah, so I read the Moz blog pretty regularly. I also pay attention to Search Engine Land and Search Engine Watch, and Marketing Land. Marketing Land is actually, I think, probably the most useful in terms of a general overall perspective of all aspects of marketing. Search Engine Land is much more specific in the search engine optimization world. And then Marketing Mag and Adweek, you can see some of the stuff that bigger agencies are up to, and then you can think, you know, that's really cool. How could I apply that for ourselves? So, and of course, plug the Kickpoint, our Twitter feed. We try to distill down the most interesting stuff out of the digital marketing world, and we have a newsletter every Friday, where we pick the 3 most interesting articles, plus music, plus a cute animal. So
Excellent.
it's kickpoint.ca. If under contact us, you click on newsletter and sign up. And that goes out every Friday morning.
Great, well, thank you very much, Dana. Tons of great material and insights there. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.